5 Live Formula One.
Welcome to the paddock here at the Hard Rock Stadium. We have just seen the Miami Grand Prix and we have just seen a new winner in Formula One. It was Lando Norris in the McLaren on the top step of the podium. It's Rosanna Tennant with you, joined by former Formula One driver Jolyon Palmer and our lead commentator Harry Benjamin. Guys, did you see it coming?
No.
I had a bit of an inkling from practice. Maybe this could have been the weekend. No, absolutely not. We all thought it's Verstappen.
You thought it was Verstappen. Jolyon, you thought it was Verstappen?
No, there's complete egg on our faces, really, isn't there? Because we all thought it was Verstappen. You have to think it's Verstappen at the moment. You know, so many times you're silly not to try and hype up the race, and then Max goes and wins it by 30 seconds. And also Norris started 5th. Upgraded McLaren, but he didn't start even near the front. But what a display from him.
What an emotional day as well, to finally get your first race win in Formula One. I was thinking back to Russia 2021 when it got away from him. Of course, the conditions were so difficult back then and he lost the race win. I was worrying something was going to happen in those last few laps. Were you worried it was just going to never happen for Lando Norris?
Well, you never know, and there's always added pressure when you've not won a race and you get that first one. It's taken a long time for Lando to get it. And Russia, Sochi 21, he was winning, looked like he had it in the bag, and it started raining, and he didn't win it in the end. So you just want to get to the end, but he had the pace. He was under no pressure, and it was not going to rain. The only thing was anyone else crashing behind and a safety car or a red flag mixing things up. But it didn't happen, and he was just delivering the laps, cruising. He looked like he'd won countless races before.
I want to know, Jolyon, though, okay, your first win in GP2, now Formula 2. For Norris, those last 10 laps must have been, well, I don't know, agony, torture. Are you replaying everything in your mind? When you were going through the last few turns, the last few laps towards your first F2 win, take us into that mindset.
It's pretty hard not to tense up a little bit because you know what's coming, you know what's at stake, and it's natural to think about you're about to win the first race. It's so hard to not think that. The best thing to do is just to carry on and pretend like it's a normal practice session or a qualifying session or a long run and just churn out the laps. He didn't have to race anyone at that time, so it was just about being consistent and doing good laps, which he'd done for the previous 10 laps as well. So he was able to blank that out, but it is difficult. You have so many things come to your mind as you're driving around. There's long straights in Miami as well. It's natural to think, I might win this one. It's only natural. It slips in and you're like, no, concentrate, keep going. And then it's just such a relief as much as it is delight when you cross the line. I mean, you can hear it in his voice, a first Grand Prix win, just a monumental feeling, and it just takes away some of that pressure. A lot of people talk about Lando. He is a generational talent. He's a superstar driver, one of the best in the field, but he had never won. And some people say, does he bottle it in big moments? Why has he never won? He's done over 100 Grand Prix. I don't think he does. I think he's a tremendous driver that's never really had a gilt-edged chance to win a race. Sochi he did that time, but it started raining. He was in a midfield car against Lewis Hamilton, and he actually did so well to be where he was to have a chance of winning. This time it was gilt-edged, and he just delivered it. It was brilliant.
What a special moment. Let's listen to what Lando Norris has to say after his first win in Formula One.
Lando, congratulations. It's been coming. You've come close before. Just tell me, how good does it hear the words Lando Norris Grand Prix winner?
It's incredible. I don't know what I'm going to say. I just want to smile the rest of the day. It's an amazing feeling seeing everyone applauding and cheering and seeing the whole team there so happy. I've let them down a few times, but I think today makes up for every moment that we've had together, the ups and downs. Today overtakes everything by a country mile. So just happiness and spreading that happiness and kind of spreading it with my whole team, with McLaren. That's something I've dreamed of doing for a long time, and today I managed to do it. So I don't know, it's hard to describe like what it is. Like, as much as I think of so many things, I'm also just empty, like I'm lost. I don't know what I'm meant to say. So just happy. I'm just going to smile and not talk. That's it.
I'm sure the fans will be happy with that too, Lando. Obviously, that safety car came out. It gave you the opportunity to be in the lead.
Yeah.
You've been there before. What's going through your mind when it was 20 odd laps to go, and you know that it's different this time because it's dry?
Yeah, I mean, I thought of it briefly, like I'm in the lead, but at the same time, I try not to think of it at all. I just try and think of, especially like the end of the first stint, my pace was very strong. I looked after the tyres beautifully. Like it was a tricky first stint. I was stuck behind Perez. I had to get out of Perez's way in turn one because he freaking came in like a rocket. So I stayed in the race. That's a good start. And just from that point on, I was like, okay, it's a long game. There's not going to be a lot of overtaking. It's going to be a race about tyre management and strategy. And everyone knows that the longer you can go, the more opportunity you buy yourself with safety cars and VSCs and all of those things. And today was my day. Today was the day that someone was like, I'm going to throw a safety car now. and it all worked out perfectly. So whoever that person was, I thank them. And I share my trophy and the champagne with them. But just a big thanks to my team because we've been working hard for these moments. We've got close. So a shout out to everyone in McLaren, my engineers, my mechanics, all the everyone back in MTC, Mr. Brown, and my family, whoever it is, and Gilles. You know, Gilles in Brazil last year. He told me I was going to win within the next year or two, and as much as I doubt a lot of people, and I doubt myself, I listened to him, and he told the truth, and he believed in me, and that's a feeling you don't really get back.
What a lovely thing. Congratulations again, Lando.
Thank you so much.
So I'm guessing we're going to see some more wins from Lando Norris in the future. When do you reckon they may come?
Well, this is the question, isn't it? What happened to Verstappen and Red Bull this weekend? We always hear sort of boy that cried wolf in a way from Verstappen. There's always some sort of clutch issue or downshift issue plaguing him throughout a weekend. Things aren't quite smooth enough yet. What did he do this weekend? Well, it was pole for the sprint race win, then pole for the Grand Prix. But that Red Bull seemingly has come unstuck a little bit with the low grip nature of this track and the troubles that have been plaguing everybody up and down the grid in terms of the tyres and keeping them alive to last a lap time and finding that sweet spot. I don't know, is this track specific, do you think, Julian, or is this actually a bit of an Achilles heel for Red Bull and that we've discovered in Miami?
I think it's probably track specific more than anything. It was 2 weeks ago he destroyed the field in China and it was as ominous a weekend as he'd ever had, I think. McLaren have bought an upgrade. That's certainly made them more competitive, and that's a level of intrigue moving forward as well. This won't be Norris's last win. He will win more. He may well win more this year as well, and hopefully that car is a genuine contender now. But also the Red Bull just never looked completely dialed in this weekend. Max was pole for the sprint. He won the sprint. He was pole for the race. But nothing was ever emphatic. The sprint pole, we spoke about it yesterday, lol. He didn't think he'd done an amazing job, but he still had it. The sprint, he had Leclerc with at an arm's length, but it was only 3 seconds. He didn't destroy anyone like he did in China. The pole in qualifying, he had it. It was pretty solid, but it was only a tenth to Leclerc as well. And finally, if it was Leclerc and Ferrari, he still would have had them at arm's length. But finally, Norris, in that upgraded McLaren, put together just some laps, consistent laps, had some clear air, and could get into his stride, and that was the main threat. And, okay, the safety car really was what transformed the race. It had jumped him straight to the front of the field. But before that, when they were all on the same medium tyres they started in, Lando was the fastest driver. Once Perez pitted, he had clear air. He was quicker than Verstappen, lap on lap on lap, and that's what gave him the chance to go long. He kept the tyres in check. And yeah, on a weekend where Red Bull were just about keeping Ferrari at bay and Norris had mistakes, when Norris didn't have mistakes, Red Bull were fallible.
But Norris had the pace, clearly. But as you say, didn't qualify, well, qualified fifth. Without the safety car, which helped Lando massively seal the win, we were trying to do the numbers on air. He would have been behind Verstappen without the safety car, but would he have been able to clinch the win otherwise?
I don't think so. He would have come out with no safety car. He'd have come out the pits sort of 7-8 seconds behind Max. But also then he still had a load of other cars. He had his teammate, Piastri. He had at least one Ferrari ahead of him, possibly two. I think he'd jumped Perez with that good first stint, but he had so much work to do. I don't think he would have won. I would have been fascinated to see what he could do, because the way that he was going on that first stint, he was just better than everyone else in terms of pace, and then that was giving him a tyre advantage for the end of the race. He had that after the safety car anyway, but he could have gone longer. I don't think he would have won. I think he'd have been on the podium without, and that would have been solid, having run 6th in the first stint anyway.
Yeah, and of course podium last time out in China as well, but it was the top step of the podium, and it was lovely to see, wasn't it? The mechanics from McLaren running out to the pit wall, cheering him on as he took the checkered flag. I spoke to Zach Brown, the CEO of McLaren, straight after the race, and this is what he had to say.
Pretty awesome. That was an unbelievable job by Lando. Team's done a fantastic job. That was a fast race car. Pretty awesome. We're gonna.
Of course, he had
the moment.
He had that full upgrade package. Has that made the difference this weekend? Can we expect more of this now?
Well, let's not get carried away. It's just race win number one, but I hope so.
A very happy Zach Brown, a very happy McLaren team, and of course a happy Lando Norris. Let's talk about his teammate though, Oscar Piastri. A difficult day with his altercation with Carlos Sainz. He then dropped through the field after having to change his front wing. There was damage that he sustained from the collision with Carlos Sainz. But at one point, I don't know about you guys, I was kind of wondering about this upgrade package that McLaren had brought because Oscar Piastri had half of it and he was running at the front of the field and Lando Norris wasn't. And I was sort of thinking, goodness, are McLaren scratching their heads as to what to do with this upgrade package?
Well, I just seen Piastri walk past as well, ultimately ended towards the back of the field. It was a good race from Piastri because he was up in P2 for a lot. He had a good start, made use of Perez dive bombing down the inside at turn 1, nearly taking out Verstappen. If that happened, we'd be talking long into the night about the ramifications of that. But it did have an effect in that Piastri was able to avoid that and also make hay on Leclerc and Sainz and get up. And he was holding his own despite having 50% of that upgrade. Clearly, I think they have found something. It's not as big as a leap that they found last year in Austria.
Because what were they saying? Andrew Benson mentioned it earlier in the weekend, didn't he? That last year when they brought that upgrade to Austria, it was worth around about a second. And Andrea Stella had slightly poo-pooed that to Andrew Benson when he put it to him. So what do we think they found this weekend, Julian, in terms of actual raw pace?
It's really difficult to say. In qualifying, I mean, Lando 1 minute was up, the next minute he was sort of 5th, and they were 5th and 6th on the grid, which is less competitive than they were last time out. The only time I think we really saw the true pace was in the Grand Prix when Norris got the clear air, could get his head down. Of course, he made a mistake at the end of sprint qualifying, got binned off on the first corner of the sprint. So it was only when he had those consecutive laps, and he was sort of 3/10, 4/10 clear of the field at that point. I don't think he's going to be 3 or 4/10 clear of the field when we get to the next race. I think it'll be close at the very least. But it is positive signs. If they found a second from where they were in China, then Formula One's going to be boring with Norris dominating. So we don't want that. He's going to be too far ahead. It was not miles behind Verstappen in China.
Oh, bits of garage are just falling.
It's
around.
all falling apart around us.
People packing down, keen to get home, and I'm sure start celebrating if you're in the McLaren team. It remains to be seen what they've actually found in real terms, I guess. But if we think back to Austria, that's coming up for nearly a year ago, I guess. It's taken this long to get the win. Is that what it's going to take in Formula One at the moment to disrupt Red Bull properly? I know we've seen Carlos Sainz and the Ferraris challenging at the front and taking race wins, but that development race, it takes so long, doesn't it, for it to really pay out?
Well, yeah, getting things through the pipeline is not the work of a moment. It takes a lot of time to design, to find a way. These Formula One cars are already so honed towards a really good setup. They're sort of merging towards the Red Bull initial concept design. Red Bull have taken that concept on this year, and everyone's playing catch up. And it is months of work of fine-tuning designs, getting the parts finally made and put on the car, and then once it's on the car, finding a way to optimize that as well. Often you find teams put upgrades on the car and actually they're like, hang on, this isn't what we'd hoped for. It takes a bit of time to actually put it in real track conditions and make the most of it. But what's encouraging for McLaren is when they've bought big packages, they get good results. Austria and Silverstone last time was a B-spec car. It was a completely new concept and it really transformed their season, and it transformed them to the point that they're close, and now they put a bit more performance on the car and they can win a race. It's really encouraging to see that correlation.
I think it's also worth remembering as well that last summer finally came online their new wind tunnel that they've been working on as well, which suddenly transforms the upgrades that they're able to produce and how quickly they're able to bring them. I think this is the beginning of some real momentum behind McLaren. They've been on an upward trajectory for the last couple of years, but they've taken big hits and big setbacks. Now, new wind tunnel, fully functioning, working towards the engine regulation change in 2026 with two top-tier drivers. Lando Norris with the relief and the breakthrough of that first win, team principal Andrea Stella with the technical know-how and the ability to just communicate effortlessly, along with the CEO Zach Brown, who is just a marketing king and has so much charisma around him. This team is going to be back to winning ways regularly in sooner than we think.
And there's an interesting subplot here because Norris has signed his future to McLaren.
Which a lot of people were like, why is he doing that? Why is he doing that?
Yeah, and we opened the weekend talking about Adrian Newey leaving. Would Verstappen leave? Would that open a seat at Red Bull? Could Norris go to Red Bull? There's been a few reports that he's turned down Red Bull. He certainly has in the past. And you're thinking, oh, Lando, you've not won a race. And now you're locking into McLaren when Ferrari are building a super team. Verstappen might go to Mercedes, and that might open a slot at Red Bull. This is a brave decision to lock in for McLaren, but it's a big move and a huge decision. He's obviously comfortable there, but this sort of momentum and this sort of results galvanizes the team. They're obviously going places, and they believe in each other. So this is huge for Norris to have faith in the team, that he's seen these progress, and also for the team to see that this driver can deliver, because the faith goes both ways.
Well, what a day for McLaren and Lando Norris. Let's take a short break and then we'll look at the rest of the field, including Max Verstappen. We're sitting in the paddock here at the Hard Rock Stadium. This is where we've been racing all weekend long. People starting to leave the paddock now, people packing up and heading home. One person who I'm sure will want to head home quite quickly is Lando Norris, so he can celebrate his first win in Formula One. So let's talk about the rest of the field. P2, Max Verstappen. Were you expecting that this afternoon?
I think I'm going to say one person who wants to head home is me. I'm going to miss my flight at this rate. I'm seeing everyone else leave. The safety car just delayed things a little bit.
Well, sorry, sir, if we could trouble you for a little more of your time.
Can you repeat the question, please?
Yeah, sure.
I was thinking about heading home.
Yeah, you're thinking about your lounge, your airport lounge. Max Verstappen P2, after some troubles throughout the weekend and yet still on top of the timesheets. P2 for him today. Was it the safety car really that ruled him out of the race win? Was it the troubles he's been having, the consistency he hasn't been able to find? What was it that got away from him this afternoon?
Yeah, we sort of spoke about it, where Red Bull haven't been the dominant force this weekend that they have been in China and other races. So they weren't escaping. I think that was the threat for Max. And we were sort of seeing the race unfold 20 laps in, and he's only 3 seconds clear of Piastri, who's got Leclerc right on his tail. You're thinking, okay, he's controlling the race. He's not particularly disappearing up the road. He wiped through that bollard, showing he's pushing as well. He's not just cruising and controlling the tyres and everything. So you're thinking, okay, he's still probably Max a win because he's Max and he's in a Red Bull and he's so good. But when you're not disappearing, you open yourself up to chance of things happening, and we spoke about it before. We were saying the only thing that might stop him is reliability, or the walls are close on this track and you never know if there's a safety car. Well, that is exactly what happened. First of all, he didn't disappear up the road. Red Bull were not in their sweet spot window, and Max couldn't drop everyone, so that the strategy was sort of irrelevant. He was too far ahead. Second of all, that little bit of luck, Sargent's in the wall, and Norris hadn't pitted, and that was the difference, the combination of the two.
A weird one for Max Verstappen then, Harry, would you say? A little blip?
Yeah, a little blip. I will be surprised if it's not normal service resumed next time out in Imola. Very different track, obviously. But yeah, it's just been a weird weekend for everybody up and down the field. Not just Verstappen. Red Bull clearly on the back because you look at Perez as well, and he was struggling too.
Yeah, he finished P5 today.
Yeah, and Perez was keeping Hamilton at bay right at the end, and didn't really ever look in it. Certainly down on pace compared to Verstappen, which is not unusual, but usually he's just P2. Today he couldn't even pip the two Ferraris. So clearly issues with Red Bull, but this circuit's just been a weird one with tyres mainly, and the lack of recovery time, I think, for them around a lap, particularly when we saw in qualifying, they finding that sweet spot and making it last for a whole lap around 5.5 kilometres. Tricky for everyone up and down. Every team principal I've heard speaking this weekend has had the same things to say about the tyres, so it is a blanket across the grid.
And the thing for Red Bull as well, when Verstappen's not escaping, then Perez is struggling. The difference is still there between those two. When Max is winning comfortably, then Checo can finish second, and it's okay, or at least third, like he did in China, and it's fine, he's doing the job. When Max is having to fight for a win, then Perez is not there to back him up, and that was the case today. He was, very forgettable, apart from that start. Then, we barely saw him in the race.
Yeah, pretty anonymous stuff. Well, let's hear from his teammate Max Verstappen, P2 for the Dutch driver today.
Hey, Max, I know you've been struggling with the car all weekend, but were you surprised in the race when it normally comes to you a little bit more, you weren't able to pull more of a gap today?
Yeah, I think on the medium it wasn't too bad, but it wasn't also particularly good. It just didn't really want to grip up. The oversteer was a little bit better on the medium, but the pace was just not really there. Like, I was pulling away, but it was just marginal, so it wasn't particularly good. But then on the hard tire, it really took a step back, where, of course, on the harder compound, you have a little bit lower mechanical grip, and that then tipped it over the edge where, we didn't seem to have a lot of grip.
When Lando managed to get ahead because of the safety car, did you think there was any chance of catching him, or do you think it was all over by that point?
I tried, of course, in turn one, but after that you settle in, you try to stay close, but I could clearly see that we were no match on the hard tires, so then I just tried to focus on my own race and bring it to the end.
As you say, Harry, I'm sure normal service will be resumed when we go racing again in Imola, and I'm sure Max Verstappen will be right up at the sharp end. P2 for him today, ahead of Charles Leclerc, P3. The weekend started strangely for him, didn't it? He had a bit of a spin in practice. That seems a very long time ago. Anyone agree?
It does, and it was on his first proper flyer in practice. And worth remembering that this was the second of 6 sprint races we'll have this year, which means you cut down to one practice session. Suddenly he's not had a practice, and he's gone straight into qualifying for the sprints, not knowing the track. He goes well around street circuits anyway, was on pole here the first time we came to Miami. But honestly, kind of 0 to hero for Charles Leclerc. But really poor start off the line for Leclerc.
And this was the thing, after the sprint race, he said how important the start was going to be in the Grand Prix and how much he'd learned, and he knew that was absolutely vital, and to stay within DRS of Max Verstappen if he was going to have a chance of taking a race win today. And it didn't really work out at all for him, did it? It almost got in his head maybe about it.
Yeah, he had wheel spin as he launched, but it didn't matter really, because he was still second after the first corner. I don't think he was going to be really getting ahead of Verstappen.
I think his bad start ultimately saved him from being wiped out by Perez.
Well, exactly. Maybe it was a genius move to get a bit of wheel spin and get a bad
He
start.
planned it so much.
Yeah, exactly. What a smart driver. No, it didn't matter because he was still second. I think what didn't help Leclerc was getting passed by Piastri in that first stint. It was a little bit soft, the defence there. Piastri came through, and then it looked like Leclerc had more pace. But he was just drifting away from Verstappen, then pitted early to try and undercut Piastri, which he achieved. But that then meant he couldn't really take the fight to Verstappen because he had the more used tyres the rest of the race. I think that was the more critical thing. Getting the bad start in the end was neither here nor there.
Let's hear from Charles Leclerc, P3 for him today, completing our podium positions.
Hey, Charles, after you survived that turn one, Checo going down the inside, how did it unfold, and can you take positives from the fact you got a podium even if the safety car didn't play into your favour?
Yeah, I think we did a great job with the situation we found ourselves in. We cannot control when a safety car is going to come out. We stopped maybe a little bit too early, but I'm sure there are reasons. I didn't have time yet to speak with the team to understand the reasons why we stopped early. That puts us a lot on the back foot, because then with the safety car everyone was packed again and I was in the middle with much more used tyres compared to everybody else, but we did a great job managing that. The start, we were very lucky to got out with Carlos, Checo and myself without any damage, because I think Checo was a bit too optimistic there.
You've obviously known Lando for a long time, you get on very well. What does it mean, do you think, for him to get that first win, and how happy are you to see it finally happen for him?
Well, I'm really happy for him, as much as I want to beat him in every race, just like everybody else on the track. At the end, we all respect each other a lot. We have all grown up together. I'm a bit older compared to Lando, and I was watching him. He was one category below me in karting. And I remember we all grew up with the same dream of being in Formula One one day. And it's always emotional, even for me, to see him obviously realizing one of his dreams and winning his first race in Formula One. It's a very special moment for him. I'm very happy for him. He deserves it. But of course, now I'll work always as hard to try and beat him in every races we are on track. They've brought an upgrade this weekend. They've been very, very strong. Now it's up to us to bring ours and to hopefully show even more of a step forward. But they raised the bar quite high.
Great stuff. Thanks, Charles.
Okay, so we've got a McLaren on the top step of the podium, Lando Norris taking his first win in Formula One, and we've got a Ferrari P3. We were saying that Ferrari were the biggest challengers to Red Bull. Have we changed our minds now after this weekend?
I think a lot this weekend was track specific. I like to hope that we've got McLaren and Ferrari nip and tuck in this fight as the next best behind Max Verstappen's Red Bull. So,
and maybe even in front here or there.
And at times maybe even in front. But Ferrari didn't bring any upgrades this weekend either. One of the few teams who didn't bring anything. I don't think they've dramatically dropped off the pace at all. I just think they clearly couldn't match the McLarens this time.
Okay, in a straight fight, if Leclerc had found the 10th and a half to be on pole...
I thought you were going to ask me, like, would you rather fight a giant duck or some little ducks or something?
We've not gone that far off course.
No.
We're good. If Leclerc could have found pole, which I think was within the realms of possibility yesterday, it was quite close, and he hadn't have had a bad start, 2 contingencies, if he had done that and he was leading the race, I think in a straight fight he's beating Verstappen today. I think the pace that Ferrari had was fine to beat Red Bull if they had the lead. Not enough to overtake, but I don't think Max had enough to overtake Charles if it was split the other way. And I think Ferrari can be encouraged by that, but I think it also says that Red Bull were not all singing, all dancing this weekend, and they were just missing a beat compared to usual. When they optimise their performance, I still think they'll have the advantage over everyone else.
And the safety car played into things massively this afternoon, you'd say?
The safety car won it for Norris.
Yeah.
And it hurt Leclerc and it hurt Sainz. They could have had second and third still. It hurt Piastri as well. It really played into Norris's hands. It's difficult to know. Norris would have had to be overtaking on track to make a podium.
And that safety car was brought out because of contact between Kevin Magnussen and Logan Sargent. Logan Sargent retiring out of his home race. That was disappointing stuff. And Kevin Magnussen picking up another penalty. Gosh, it's been a weekend, hasn't it, for Kevin Magnussen? And a busy one for the stewards with those penalties.
And he didn't serve that penalty correctly.
Yeah.
Well, he was under investigation for it as well. So I think Magnussen he wanted to get on the plane ASAP out of here. It's not been a great weekend for K-Mag, unfortunately.
He's just walked past us. He didn't look very happy having met with the stewards again. No, don't worry, he's out of earshot. You can say what you like.
I'm sure he will listen to the podcast.
Yeah, I think I'm speaking facts. But and ultimately for Haas, they were outdone this weekend in a tight battle with RB.
P11 just on the cusp of a point.
Was P7.
So we're coming to the end of the podcast. we haven't spoken.
Jolene's now hosting the podcast.
Because, by the way, my flight is imminently departing, so at least I'm coming to the end of the podcast. But we speak about there is mutterings of points going down beyond 10th place. Now, we haven't got into it at all through the weekend, but when you see Ocon getting 10th, just beating Hülkenberg to 10th place, and it's brilliant for Alpine, who have also bought upgrades. They've shedded weight out of the car, and Ocon has got his elbows out. He's going to put a good race together, and he's managed to sneak a point for 10th place. And I like to see that. I'm pleased that points go down to 10th and you really earn it. Hülkenberg yesterday really had to fight. Well, he didn't. His teammate had to fight hard to get Hülkenberg 7th place. But these minor points mean so much to Alpine, to Haas. And I'm not going to open this big can of worms.
It would be points down to 12th, yeah, is what they're...
I don't want it.
No,
that's what I'm saying. I don't want it. I don't want Hülkenberg to get a point for 11th. I want Ocon to cling on to that final point in 10th position. Having been a driver that's scrabbling around to nick a point here or there, and I've finished 11th too many times in my career, but the feeling of getting a point, getting a top 10 is such a good feeling when you're struggling, and every point really matters. And Ocon today has really had the combination of 6 pretty strong races for him behind the wheel, and Alpine finally nicked that point away from Haas. Subplot, we could be here for another 2 hours if we open that can of worms, probably.
Yeah, we have had this debate off air, but I think we'll have to save it a little bit for another pod. It's hard to disagree with Jolyon's logic there, but there are a lot of other points that will support going down to P12, in my opinion. But let's save that for another pod.
Save that for another race weekend. So let's just go through your top 10. Lando Norris, first race win in Formula 1, ahead of Max Verstappen and Charles Leclerc. That was your podium. Carlos Sainz, Sergio Perez, Lewis Hamilton, Yuki Tsunoda, George Russell, Fernando Alonso and Esteban Ocon, your point scorers. Anyone of note in that gaggle of drivers towards the back end of the top 10 that you were impressed with today? Or were you expecting more from some of them? Maybe the Mercedes, not really showing much this weekend.
I don't expect a lot from Mercedes at the moment, to be honest. They were okay. Hamilton trailed Perez, but does that say more about Hamilton or Perez? At least Lewis was more comfortable in the car today. That second stint was solid. Tsunoda, decent haul of points. Flipped the script from yesterday and Ricciardo's heroics. Yuki back to good form. It was fairly standard stuff, I think, further back. I think Aston Martin have been a bit AWOL this weekend.
Yeah.
Well, Fernando Alonso finishing P9 and then his teammate Lance Stroll P17, so a big discrepancy between those two drivers. I think realistically the bottom half of the grid, again, not much to write home about. Disappointing for Oscar Piastri, as we spoke about, finishing P13 after that contact with Carlos Sainz. Daniel Ricciardo, it's been a weekend of two halves, really, hasn't it, for him? P15 for the Aussie driver and a way off his teammate Yuki Tsunoda up in 7th. So have we enjoyed Miami?
I've loved it. First visit here. I've loved being near the beach. I've loved the whole vibe around the Hard Rock Stadium. Yeah, the track is probably not the best when it comes to racing, but today there was some decent stuff going on. I like it. I'll come back.
if you're invited.
I'm invited.
Jolyon, I know you want to leave right now, but would you come back?
I know, but don't get me wrong, I've had a lovely weekend, Rosanna. It's a good event, actually. I think the event has been good. I don't love the track, but what I have also enjoyed is that it's not been that easy to pass. And this is a bit throwback in Formula 1. Maybe I'm too much of a traditionalist with this points down to 10th, or I'm not going to say points down to 6th, but I like 10th. I like drivers having to overtake in a braking zone. Russell put on a nice move in the race. I can't remember who it was on now. Maybe I think Hülkenberg earlier on. I like that Sainz and Piastri were fighting tooth and nail because it wasn't just DRS drive-bys for a faster car. In the end, there was a small bit of contact and Piastri was out, and it was a bit tough
clunky,
racing.
that one. Yeah.
It was, but I like that drivers are having to get their elbows out. And whilst Miami's not a thrill of a race circuit to drive, the way that the racing panned out kept a bit of intrigue. And I think it's something that, again, I mean, this is another can of worms, isn't it? Talking about DRS and drive-by overtakes with 30 seconds to go. But
he's giving me a countdown now.
Should we delay your flight? Just
No.
Get into these.
BA will do that on their own, don't worry.
Well, I've probably got 26 seconds to go now. I guess driver of the day maybe is a foregone conclusion. Who would you rate as your driver of the day, Jolyon?
Lando.
Harry?
It's got to be Lando Norris.
Yeah, I agree. It's been a long time coming, but Lando Norris has finally taken his first win in Formula 1, and the reception he got from all the other drivers, I have to say, showed, I think, his class. George Russell saying, he's such a good driver. I think they've all been expecting him to get a win probably sooner than he has, and finally the day has come. A coming-of-age moment for Lando Norris. We'll travel safely home, Jolyon. He's
Checks watch.
Not even going to contribute to the very end. Okay, fine.
He was supposed to buy you a load of margaritas, wasn't he? For all the celebs you got us on the grid.
Empty promises. Harry and I, we are going to go crocodile hunting potentially tomorrow.
Yes, looking forward to it.
Yeah. And then we all meet again for Imola. Next one.
Yeah.
Yeah. Big racetrack, lots of history there.
Beginning of the European season, finally.
Absolutely, I know. It's been.
You guys winding me up now? Wrap it up, guys. Let's go.
And if we talk about points down to 12,
let's not get into the Everglades now. Save it for another time. Come on.
This has been an IMG production for BBC Radio 5 Live.
Jolyon, one more thing.